This may not make much sense, but it's my personal belief that Test rugby is almost always better than it is. Whereas at most levels of rugby, teams will have some sort of personal game plan to go on and then leave it at that. The accuracy and intricacy of the international game means even the driest, or in the case of Scotland's previous test, the wettest encounters have so much to pull apart and feast on. If the World Cup final is a full-blooded juicy banquet, Saturday's encounter between Scotland and Italy was like one of those evenings when you get in late, feel hungry, and just decide to boil the kettle and make an absolute shit ton of cheap pasta. It's not good, but there's so much there, and it certainly satisfies your appetite. 0-17 is an ugly scoreline, and not just because it looks a bit like a potato holding a toilet to gunpoint, but there's also something very interesting going on in the fact that this was a rare game in which Scotland were only actually as good as they were. Scotland winning after only scoring on 3 occasions felt right, them scoring just through one great solo try, a mass phase crash over, and whatever Adam Hastings sealer at the end was, felt fair, even if a 17-point margin of victory felt somewhat less so. Their first try, not just of the match, but of the whole tournament, 3 games in, through Porridge King, Captain Man, Stuart Hogganator, is certainly the prettiest. On a core level, it's a fantastic spot, step, and finish by Hogg, who wins no style points for the dive here, but he does put the bastard down, so wings and roundabouts. But just check this freeze frame from directly before he makes the break. There are 10 Scotland players in shot, but only 1 Italian, Bramstein, who's in an offside position, performing a role I'll get onto slightly later on, but hence unavailable to make the tackle. This gives Scotland so much time and so many options. This leads to Luca Morisi, Italy's defensive captain, spending the whole jog up checking the line, being fully aware of how many players Scotland have back, just checking where his fellow pasta boys are, making sure everyone's in position, and just watching the constant threats from the other side. It's like he's a teacher at a Pelican crossing, looking both ways to a degree of almost parody. He doesn't drift out to cover the extra threats until he knows for certain the inside of him is covered by another man, except Hogg registers something that he doesn't. That man is a forward. Morisi makes the right decision for a slightly different situation and just leaves a player significantly slower than Hogg with too much work to do to cover him, meaning the Chief Ahoik himself can dart right through and round big Jaden Hayward and over the line, only for Gregor Townsend to give such a patronising slow clap you begin to wonder whether Finn had a point. The other big factor in this score was the pressure King Blairhorn's chase put on Carlo Canna, who does exceptionally well just to clear it. Because if any old rugby cliche is always going to be true, is that the kick is not always as good as it is. The kick is, of course, only ever as good as the chase. And this leads me on to a really interesting, innovative tactic Italy have brought to this Six Nations. If you'd asked me to predict which side in this year's championship would be the most forward-thinking innovative, the only way Italy would have been one of my first 5 guesses would have been if I deliberately chose to forget that Warren Gatland was leaving Wales again. And yet, here we are, because Italy are so much better than they are. This championship, Italy have been playing everything off genuinely class 10 Tommaso Allen, with Callum Brayley breaking his own season's best this weekend by putting in a massive, enormous, so many. He made 2 box kicks in 80 minutes. Genuinely class 10 Tommaso Allen makes every decision. He controls the game himself. He controls the attack, and crucially for this piece, him or fellow fly half Carlo Canna makes every single kick. The basic plan is that they bustle between phases until Allen or Canna spot something, then bam. So I'm just going to pull up a random example of how Italy set to clear the ball. Everyone lingers about here as carrying options for Brayley. Allen, where it's behind them all, incredibly deep. They crash and carry until Allen decides he fancies poking it into the other half. However, because he's so deep, doing so puts the entire Italian team offside, meaning they can't chase the ball, else they'll concede a penalty. Except, note Matteo Minozzi stood exactly in line with Allen on the wing. Now, there's a weird law in rugby whereby when a player who was onside when the ball was kicked, or the kicker himself, overtakes you, you are now yourself onside. So, Italy would place either Minozzi or Bellini, one of the 2 quickest players on the touchline, to just absolutely hair it upfield, to sprint as fast as they could. The job wasn't to chase, it wasn't to go after the ball, it was just to put their other teammates who would chase onside. Often Minozzi or Bellini would even be as far as possible from where the ball was going, just so they could get top gear, instead of moderating their speed as they're judging the kick. I don't know what it is about Italy and inventing new original ways around the offside law, but this means they can put 13 players in offside positions, and providing they don't move forward between the ball being kicked and Minozzi or Bellini overtaking them, get away with it. You could hear at virtually every kick referee Ben O'Keefe shouting something along these lines.
Who's chasing? Taking back into.
This just confirmed Italy had made him aware this was their tactic pre-game. so he could keep an eye out for it and not accidentally penalise an Italian forward that looks offside instead of just exploiting this loophole. Teams always have an element of this, but Italy built an entire game around it. They were able to organise the defensive line whilst they still had the ball. The only breakthrough on kick return any team has made over 3 games was this by Hogg, and that came from a back and forth kicking battle that prevented Italy being able to organise efficiently. However, like virtually everything Franco Smith's Italy are doing, it's so close to being genuinely kind of ingenious, but it's just 10-15% short. Part of the appeal of a box kick down the tram lines is that it traps the opposition in an awkward position until your defence has reorganised. Italy have invented the means of getting that defence organised quickly enough that you can put the ball into wherever the space is, anywhere on the pitch, rather than just down the wing, which would typically give you an edge on the next phase. But it's come at the cost of competing for the ball. Italy are never going to regather one of these punts by Allen, but it allows their defence to be rock solid instead. I wouldn't be surprised if at some stage this World Cup cycle we see another nation, most likely for me England or the Springboks, take this tactic and fine-tune it to perfection. And Italy's ultimately ill-fated brushes with brilliance continue into their attack. The Pizza boys made plenty of breaks, particularly through the Matti collective, wingers Matteo Minozzi and Matteo Bellini. Minozzi is often celebrated as the key spark in this Italian side, but Bellini has just had his first straight standout game and yet isn't attracting anything like the attention Minozzi did in his own breakthrough Six Nations. Their footwork is impressive, but on breaks made by the other, watch their respective support lines. Both are picking superb angles and only being denied the chance to finish by either the vision of the players around them or a quality scramble defence by Scotland. In particular, we've got this effort by Stuart Hogg, who misses the initial tackle on Bellini, then manages to get back and make the cover tackle in the 22. However, from a situation like this, Italy aren't quite sure what to do. As I've previously discussed, Allen and Canna are drilled to be the only decision makers, and hence there's a squiggly panic to their play once anyone else has to make one. If Cannone gives the pass early here, Minozzi has yards of space in a one-on-one, but as a lock he never finds himself in positions like this. So he waits, he overthinks, he doesn't do anything, and he never gives the pass. Pelledri here has an overlap outside him, but in an effort to claim the title of the next Parise, or to himself, he ignores his teammates and goes himself. And here, Tommaso Allen calls a play before penalty advantage is given. The idea appears to be, ball looks like it's going to him, but instead it goes to Canna, and Allen loops around him to fix the defender before spinning it wide. The entire Scotland backline are in shot here. Both Bellini and Big Jaden Hayward are out right on the wing, and it'll only take 2 passes to get it out there and for Italy to get back into the game. But instead, Canna hears penalty advantage and tries a stupid chip that's never really on. Now, the phrase free play has crept into rugby the last few years. The idea being you try a low percentage play when you know you have a penalty coming, but sometimes it's important to remember just why you wouldn't ever try that without the safety blanket. Insult to injury, Italy then lose the ball from the line out and the chance is thoroughly blown. Whilst the Italians blowing chances is nothing new, the way in which they're creating those chances does feel different, however. It was easy enough to point out against Wales when they're facing out of position George North, but it appears Italy's attack is entirely about engaging the opposition 13. This is best demonstrated by a chance here. Scotland put the ball out on the full, and you can see a call is made somewhere, meaning Big Jaden Hayward, as you can see here, hears it and rushes alongside the other Italian backs into position. The forwards and near side winger Bellini, meanwhile, dawdle. They take their time. Scotland have all eyes on them, not on the other backs, so they know the line out isn't going to be thrown anytime soon. Oh, it's in. This catches Scotland ever so slightly off guard, meaning Italy can slide Bellini in as a first receiver for the most simple of the passes and then use the 2 distributors, Allen and Canna, to get the thing wider. Conventional wisdom is you want to try and fix each man along the line, but Italy aren't interested in that. The only man they're thinking about is number 13, Chris Harris. This series of passes is only here to get it into his channel. Essentially, the outside centre is the hinge of the defence. It holds the door and the door frame together, and whereas most would look to attack the full structure, door, hinge, groovy chick nameplate, frame, knob, all of it, Italy know there's a fair chance, a less chance but still a fair chance, the door falls down if they just go for the far simpler option of only attacking the hinge. They then built the entire attack around this idea. Engage Harris and open sesame seed cookies, an Italian delicacy. There's a pun for you. There's a little pun, it isn't very good. The backs are incredibly deep, meaning they have no pressure on the timing of the passes, and you don't have to worry about a potentially lower skill level in any of these players. They can get into Harris's channel very easily. By forcing Harris to come in on Marisi, they've essentially left Blair Kinghorn, the door frame, on his own. Big Jaden Hayward and less big Matteo Minozzi float into his channel, and all Marisi has to do is select which of those two is in the more space. This gives Minozzi time to make the chip, which he eventually regathers, sets up position in the 22. With the hinge taken care of and themselves close to the line now, Italy start trying to engage each individual defender, as though they're giving the door that light little kick that will knock it down now they've done most of the work. Now it isn't held in place. They blow it because, of course they do, they're Italy, but the fundamentals are absolutely there. Italy are almost more frustrating this year than ever, because if the players could keep their cool and upskill to a level at which Franco Smith's mad ideas like this could be executed without safety precautions, in which these ideas could be sharp rather than just clever, if they could shore up the defence an extra 8 or 9, 10%, Italy could genuinely be in with a shot at the title right now. And yet, because they're not quite working, it looks so much worse. Whereas other coaches have targeted damage limitation, Smith has gone out to be far more interesting. And yet, in 2 games out of 3, they haven't scored a point. In so many ways, this has possibly been the most encouraging Six Nations for Italy since they last avoided the wooden spoon in 2015, and yet none of that is shown on the scoreboard. Franco Smith is only on a caretaker coach contract, due to be out of a job by the autumn, and I worry the powers that be won't see these super encouraging signs and keep him on, because Italy right now are so much better than they are. This ambition was essentially what led to the final try, scored by one Mr. Adam Hastings, or as the press have been calling this tournament, not Finn. Italy had been absolutely going for it, knowing they need 2 quick scores, and kept the ball in play for over 3 minutes, 3 passages of play in a row. This is knackering, especially late on, but they've clearly backed their own fitness, and they made this lovely break as Minozzi shrugged off an injury to tell Giovanni with a superb offload, except a bunch more bullshit happens. Italy blow as usual, Scotland come away, all of this stuff happens, and eventually they have this ruck, and fullback, Big Jason Hayward, is forced to come in as the guard, his entire team knackered and slow to get back. He points to replacement Basinji to stay wide, except a glint of ambition comes over again. He sends the turnover and heads in to secure it. This leaves the wing entirely undefended. It wasn't worth the risk. And Hastings clear to seal the game, and bizarrely net Scotland a record margin of victory out in Rome. Scotland's other try was slightly more hard-earned, as their typically directionless, unthreatening on-the-line patter play continued until the almighty indestructible Mish gets hold of the ball. He makes no more ground than anyone else, but the sheer oomph of this hit here generates so much momentum he arcs slightly out on his run rather than straight ahead as the previous phases have been, and this leads to a man stepping in. Suddenly Scotland have a 2-on-2 with plenty of width to play in and only 4 metres needed to be made. Jamie Ritchie's wonderfully clean allows them very quick ball, and this can just send Harris straight into the space next to Minozzi, who's an entirely fine defender, but frankly, providing he isn't charging straight at your stomach, it's hard to drop a man who has quite a few inches on you without conceding a few inches yourself. This try is all about Scotland finally getting some pace and momentum into their close-up play, and hopefully that serves as a big reminder ahead of France coming to town next week. Italy, on the other hand, head to Dublin, ready to try and turn those interesting things into things that actually work. Because this was a fascinating game decided by 5 or 6 moments of small margins, and it led to things that weren't one-sided looking as though they were, because, after all, that's rugby. A sport that is always so much more interesting than it is. Hey gang, how are you doing? I hope you like rugby and enjoyed that video. I recognise the ending is now slightly out of date considering the Ireland v Italy game has been postponed, but that does mean there's one fewer game. I'm working through the lot of them. I'm working through every game of this Six Nations and trying to catch up on some women's games as I can if I can get time as well. So there's one on the England-France game, the Women's Six Nations, as well as all of the games up until this round 3. I'm going to move on to Wales-France. That's going to be next. That's going to be the next one. However, being halfway through the tournament means we're also halfway through the Super Brew League. So there's a league going on fantasy rugby-wise if you want to have a look at that. Currently, we have a top 3. And 3rd place in this league is one Mr. Luke Campbell. I don't know whether it's Luke Campbell that plays in the back row for Canada. Could well be. Campbell's superb hoppers. 2nd place, we have Chris Watson, Christoph's gigantic maestros. But currently in 1st place is Emily Housden with the pink Thunderbolts. I am way down in 526th place. I'm not doing this well this year. I did really well in the World Cup. I finished, I think, about 15th at one point. I was top. I'm not doing as well this year. There is a team called the Patriotic Llamas. That's pretty excellent. There's a few good names in there. Those are just the ones that are standing out to me. Jacob Rees-Hogg, again, appreciated, but also very much not. Thank you very much to everyone that is contributing there. Thank you to everyone that contributes on Patreon. Thank you to everyone that's watched this video right the way through. I recognise I've made genuinely one of the longest videos on the channel on a game that not many people enjoyed. I was very much in the minority in thinking that was a fun match just because things were happening, people were trying to do things even if they weren't paying off. So thank you very much. I've rambled for more than long enough, but congratulations to Emily, and thank you to everyone else, and I'll see you very soon for Wales against Le Français, the glorious French overlords. Thank you very much. See you then.
That's a